You know, maybe you make a game and you realize that, hey, I actually didn't like that at all. That's entirely possible. Abracadabra, you're a full-time game dev. Hey, what's up guys? So I'm making this video to respond to an email I got from a viewer in Portugal. Now, they were asking me for advice on how to transition from their current profession and career as a pharmacist to game development. You know, they explained that they're nearly 40 now and they've been kind of working for 20 years in this kind of situation, you know, the 9 to 5 grind. So now they're kind of looking to pursue something on their own terms and move into game development with the hopes of creating a self-sustainable studio in their home country of Portugal. Now that's a very admirable dream to have, to kind of pursue that situation, and I can understand that because it's something that I'm in the middle of trying to accomplish myself. And I was initially going to keep this email private, but I thought that there might be others in a similar situation, and making it public is kind of beneficial for the entire community. So, you know, transitioning from your current profession to game development, you know, and transitioning is the correct way to think about it. What you don't want to do is just quit your current job and, I don't know, buy an expensive game dev course and expect to become a full-time game developer within a year. I mean, that's not going to happen. You know, what you want to do is keep your bread and butter, have some kind of financial foundation, and work on the indie stuff as a side hustle, kind of growing it, slowly cultivating it, till eventually it's profitable enough that you can cut the tether of your main job and make the leap across. That's the smart way to do it. And it's why having a job that shares the same skills is not a bad idea at all. You know, in my case, I'm a game developer during the day for other companies, and then I come home and I do my indie stuff. But there is a direct skills exchange between the two. I've got a good friend, Oliver Joyce, who recently made exactly this transition. We were working side by side at a studio, and he went from working 5 days a week down to 4, down to 3, and gradually, comfortably transitioning out to his own independent enterprise, Whiskey Barrel Studios. He's got his own YouTube channel, and he's the creator of the Swords and Sandals franchise. He's a great game designer, great developer, and a good guy, so go check his content out. You know, and this transition phase can be quite brutal, of course, because you're essentially doing 2 jobs at the same time at its peak. And I'm kind of experiencing that myself. So you have to be ready for that. That's why I always make sure that people have a long think about the implications of running their own business and make sure it's really for them. Well, it depends what facet of game dev you're trying to operate. You know, whether you're trying to be a programmer or a designer or an artist, or just kind of like a studio head. But if you want to run your own business, then you have to know a bit about everything. And if you're not planning to be doing the hands-on work, then you need to be in a position where you can be a producer and kind of organize everything. And that also means funding everything. So keep that in mind. But no matter how you cut it, there's going to be huge amounts of work involved in making that transition. And as I've said on many occasions in other videos, you know, what is your key motivation for getting into game dev? You see, a lot of people think they want to be full-time game developers because, you know, they have a strong love of games and they figure, well, they love games so much they will most certainly love other aspects of it, the construction side. But having a love for games does not on its own translate to becoming a game developer, you know, not by a long shot. And that's the mistake I've seen people make in the past. You know, they love gaming and gaming culture so much that they assume this means they are destined to make games. And they decide to try their hand at the construction side, only to be hit with this huge wall of resistance once they get past the superficial surface. Because, you know, on the surface level, from an outsider's perspective, game development is very enticing, you know, it seems very glamorous. The reality is that game dev, for the most part, is a massive grind. It has a lot of fun moments, but in between those fun milestones, it's just hard work and grind. You know, last night I was up till 3:30 a.m. or something like that fixing some bugs. You know, the same bugs I thought I already fixed that decided to pop their heads back up. It was absolutely brutal. It was horrible and I hated it. And it was absolutely just the worst situation I could have found myself in. Well, maybe not the worst, but you know, At the moment, it did seem like it was very difficult. And it's funny because there were a few moments where I was reflecting on all the different jobs I could have done in my life. And, sometimes the idea of just doing a 9 to 5 is a lot more enticing, because at least in those situations when, you put in your hours, you can just kind of clock off. You see, and that's the kind of the fallacy that gets propagated a lot by this kind of get rich quick gurus or whatever. They will try to tell you that the 9 to 5, the 38-hour week, is a scam, it's a prison, you don't want it, and they'll push some kind of course on you that will set you free. But you see, running your own business is a lot more involving than doing a 9 to 5 job. It's rewarding and satisfying, but it's so much more demanding. Ask any successful entrepreneur and they will tell you that they regularly put in 70-hour, 80-hour weeks and a minimal sleep and things like this. And on top of that, you have to carry all the burdens of running the business operations. You have tax, you have to manage marketing, advertising, sales, you have to manage the team and everything else in between. There's a lot of overhead involved. Is your next game going to make money? Is it even going to get completed? Is it going to make enough? And if you're sick, you can't just email your boss or something and ask for a day off, because the show must go on. The more money you make does not necessarily mean the more freedom you have, because the more money you have, the more liabilities you have, the more bills you typically have. Your life becomes progressively more complicated. Yes, there is an element of freedom, but it comes at a cost as well. The point I'm trying to make here is don't pursue a life of entrepreneurship with the idea of escaping labor, because you actually have a bottomless pit of work waiting for you like you cannot possibly imagine. But if you are committed to that life, a life of perpetual struggle and growth in pursuit of a worthy ideal, an ideal of passion and creativity, then it's going to be worth it for sure. But listen up, because I think how to go about it is fairly straightforward in my opinion. As Shia LaBeouf would say, just do it. Just start. All the tools and knowledge you could possibly ever need surround you in plain sight. You have the Googles, you have the Reddits, you have the Udemys, you have the GDCs, you have thousands of hours of free tutorials on YouTube to cover all facets of the game making process. You just have to start. And the first and foremost thing you have to do, if you haven't started already, is start making games, start making mini games, start learning the full process, getting familiar with the process from start till end, formulating game ideas to the production aspects, to releasing it, how to create a store page, how to market the game, how to manage the sales, how to find publishers if that's what you require. You just have to go through the motions, because when you do, the new paths on that will lead you to this kind of studio life that you want are going to emerge. You see, I didn't just wake up one day and decide I want to become an indie developer and make games full time. That's not what happened. I progressively got to that point. I started making mini games as a hobby, just playing around, tinkering, making some silly games for Newgrounds. Then I made a better one, and then I would make a better one. I didn't just wake up and make that decision. So I encourage people to try to follow it through the process of being a hobby and making sure they actually like it. You have to get your feet wet. You got to put your feet in the water and decide if you actually like the temperature, and decide if you actually enjoy the process. Maybe you make a game and you realize that, hey, I actually didn't like that at all. That's entirely possible. That can happen, because there might be some aspects of it that just don't really jive with a person's personality. There's no silver bullets. There's no universal 3-step process or formula that's going to take you to the path of indie dev greatness. Do this, then do this, then do this, and boom, abracadabra, you're a full-time game dev. But that 3-step process does not exist. And anyone who tries to tell you it does is taking you for a ride, because there is so much human variability based on our own personalities, our own character. What works for one person is not necessarily going to work for another, because without knowing somebody's exact disposition, their mental state, it's very difficult to craft some kind of a plan of action, because So all I can say is you just have to start the process. You have to start getting into it, getting into the thick of it, start cutting the weeds. I'm a firm believer that everybody needs to find their own path in a way, because there's great growth potential on that discovery process. So to just bypass it and go straight to the end, you kind of miss out on all the growth, which is why to just get all the answers from someone is kind of pointless. The journey, it's that growth that's going to determine how good the end is, the outcome. It's that saying, the more harder the battle, the sweeter the victory. And I totally understand people asking others for advice, and I think there is merit in that when the questions are right, and there is a suitable time for that. But I also think that often people already know the answers. They know what they need to do, but they're just looking for often a confirmation or validation of sorts. They're standing on the edge of the cliff, wanting to jump into the abyss, into the unknown, and there is a level of anxiety, of self-doubt. So they're just looking for somebody to give them a nudge. And other times they just haven't put in the time to make a plan, because you sit down and you make a plan. Often the next step will kind of become apparent to you just through the process of planning. It's fearful on that other side of the abyss, looking down off the cliff. And, for good reasons, right? Because starting a business is not an easy thing. There's nothing easy about it. You have to learn to rely on yourself a lot. And it's interesting that the more accessible things have become, knowledge-wise, the more points of entry into any profession there are, people often find themselves hesitating a lot more. Sometimes you just need to make a move. For those with the right work ethic, character, strength, and discipline, there is an amazing life to be had when you walk through that door of entrepreneurship and self-reliance. And I'm not even talking about any eventual outcomes. It's all about the journey. It always has been, it always will be. Game devs often talk about launch day being the most underwhelming day in the process, the day your creation is released into the wild, because the adventure has ended in some way, and there is some sadness there. But then you regroup back at the tavern, sharpen your sword, and start planning out your next quest, a bigger and bolder one. And so the journey of creation continues. So really, the question becomes one of courage and hunger. How bad do you want it, really? Right? I think I need to play some kind of power music over this. You have to sacrifice your time, sacrifice your pleasures. It always comes back to discipline and consistency. You have to keep fighting forward. When you reach your goal, find a bigger goal. You will fail and fail again. Get ready for that. Embrace failure. You will struggle, you will doubt yourself, you will cry, but you have to keep on getting up and pushing on, even when the cards seem stacked against you or people tell you you're wasting your time. That's when it's your time to show your character, to show your strength. That point of interaction, when you feel like quitting and don't, it's like working out a muscle at the gym. You're strengthening it. It's like a mental repetition. But in this case, the muscle being worked out is your character. Without serious effort, you will never get anywhere worth going. You will never find what you are looking for. And without discipline and focus, you will never keep it. Understand the journey is everything. The journey builds strength of character, which is required to slay the demons of doubt. Stay strong, stay hungry, stay disciplined and consistent, and your time will come. Go get it, guys. I wish you all the best. And a big thank you to all of you who are supporting me on Patreon. You are huge motivators for me to continue my work, and I cannot possibly thank you enough.